Mm-hmm. La, la, la. Okay. Here we go. Sorry, everybody. Still getting this set up. Here we are. Okay, here we are. Yay! Hello, hello. Hello, everyone. Yes, welcome back. Oh, my goodness. Do we make it? Do we make the crossover? We made the crossover. Yay! Hello, hello. Hello, welcome. Trixie, hello. Chris, hello, welcome. J-Jack. Oh, I love that name. Dania, I love it. Delulu, welcome. Welcome in, everybody. Yay, we made it. We made it. Woohoo! Oh, I'm so glad about that. Hello, Willie. Willie B. Michelle, Kristen. Hello. Good to see you. Hi, Allison. Welcome in. Linda. Star. Good to see everybody. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad. Hello, Jennifer, Eliza. I'm glad everybody can make it back over here. This is my third live today, actually. I did a very quick Q&A this morning on the TikTok, and then a real quick 30-minute pre-game show over on the TikTok. And now here we are settling in to a nice, calm, relaxing YouTube live. So happy to be here. Oh, thanks, Tia. I do try, I think we all have to have light moments, right? That's very important. So welcome in, everyone. I had so many questions about this case, everyone, the Iverson case, that I thought, well, we best talk about it here. Yes, exactly. Evie, hello, welcome. Hello, Tay, hello. Oh my goodness, everybody. There's so much going on in the world right now. So tonight, I'm going to take you through the complaint that was filed just yesterday by Mr. Iverson, who's a prosecutor, and he works in The Hague. He is part of the International Criminal Court system that is set up. It is a lot. It's a lot. And he is unable to do his job right now because of an executive order that was filed by Mr. Trump and his minions. So because of how it was put together, he is unable to speak with the head prosecutor in the ICC. And because of that, he is unable to, work on war crimes in Darfur. So this is kind of a big deal. It's kind of a big deal. Of course, Boxer Mom, I'm happy to do it. When was that EO filed? It was February 6th. Right, it was February 6th. Oh, from Arizona. Hello. So I thought we'll go ahead and start, I think, by going through the executive order. That really gives us the framework that we're dealing with here. Hello, H. Titus. Welcome in. I've got a lozenge here, everyone. So hopefully that won't be too distracting. But let's zoom in a little bit. I've made some notations. This is the executive order here. Let me just double check. Is my sound okay, everyone? Thank you so much, Kimberly. I appreciate that. Anything been done like this before? Oh, not that I know of. There have been, we've had fights internationally before, but we've never really been this connected. Oh, it sounds great. Oh, thank you. Yes, Chris. Yes, just starting now. Oh, thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. So we have had a lot of, disagreements internationally, but we've never been as connected as we are right now globally. So to know what's going on and see what's happening, this is unusual. But if it's happened before in the past, unknown. No, I'm just getting started. You're doing just fine. I'm just getting started tonight. Yes. Oh, from Oklahoma. Okay. So I have my Tang here and my throat lozenges. And I'm going to take you through just kind of the justification right? The justification paragraphs used here, because we're trying to figure out why did he even issue this? And of course, you have to remember, Mr. Trump's not reading all of this stuff. He's just, getting the bullet points or pictures and then signing it. So there's that. Oh, Oklahoma as well. Okay, okay. No, you do not have to be a paid member to watch the lives. I do have membership benefits. So if you are a member, there are some bonuses along the way, but I try to make it so that the lives are, you do not need to pay at all to come and join the live. I am so thankful for the members. They help me to pay for my toner and my paper and my sticky notes. So I'm very thankful for that. But I just want to make sure the knowledge is available to everyone. So I'm very thankful for that. All right, there we go. We got our first tang and we're good to go. Let's talk about this executive order, everybody. Now remember, executive orders, right, are not law. These are, anytime you've got a boss who sets out what they want to do in the office, right? So different areas of the company, they're going to set rules out like we want this, we want that. That's kind of what executive orders are. They're saying the executive branch, whatever is under the purview of the executive office, this is what we want you to do. And it can be very powerful and very important, but you have to remember the president does not make law. That is not what the president does. Executive orders are what I would say quasi-law. They're more that administrative road and that kind of thing. So much. Oh, thank you so much, Bruce Wayne's mother. Oh, I appreciate it. I appreciate that so much. I'm happy to be able to come on and, go through and explain this stuff because it's crazy how ridiculous it gets. Oh, thank you. Is it Dania? Dania? Oh, that's such a pretty name. I love it. Thank you so much. All right, so let's get started. Again, I'm just going to go through the first couple of paragraphs here so we can figure out why he did this and then we can dive into the complaint. So here we go, everyone. Since we're going to be on this page for a little bit, I'm not going to do a sticky note just because it's mentioned here what exactly it is. So here we go. By the authority vested in me as president, by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which is the IEEPA, and we'll go through that a little bit tonight. This is the reason why he's doing all of the things that he's doing with these executive orders when it comes to the tariffs. He has said we're in an emergency situation, and so I'm going to use this law for emergencies to do whatever I want. So that's the big piece of it. The National Emergencies Act here, so the NEA, and the Immigration and Nationality Act here, which he, again, is just using as another thing to say like, oh, I've got so much power, I've got to take care of immigration, so I can just do whatever I want, which is not really how that works, but that's what he's trying to do. So keep that in mind as we go through this. The only reason these executive orders are just flooding through are because he's claiming we have these emergencies. Now, in order for that to be decided, it's got to go through the courts. Now, we've got over 120 lawsuits going right now. Probably even, we might be up to 130 or 230 pretty soon. But that's what's happening here, is they're saying, look, you're using the statute incorrectly. And because of that, you're way out of line. The legal term that we use for this, and I always say it wrong, so I put the pronunciation here so that I would say it better. I don't know, ultravirus. I'm going to say it wrong every time. It's like virus, so ultravirus is the doctrine that is being used. And it's basically saying, let me write it out. If we just write it out, it'll be easier. Here we go. This is the legal doctrine when somebody is doing something that is outside of their powers. All right, so it's outside of his a jurisdiction. It's outside of the power that he has as the president. And this is what we call it, the ultra vires or whatever. I want to say V, but that's not right. So this doctrine is being pled in almost all of these lawsuits because what he's doing is he's going forward and doing things that are outside the scope of what the president's allowed to do, right? So we have to have a court come in and firm it up, and it takes a lot of time to do all of that. All right, here we go. I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, find that the International Criminal Court, ICC, as established by the Rome Statute, has engaged in illegitimate and baseless actions targeting America and our close ally, Israel. So sometimes I say Israel. I think it's from too many Christmas songs, but forgive me. I say everything incorrectly. So we've got two pieces here. One is the Rome Statute. That's an international statute setting out the ICC, and the other is we're talking about Israel. So the problem here is that Mr. Trump's all like, oh, Israel, if you did anything that I think wasn't okay, then I'm going to take you down. So let's take a peek quick at the Rome Statute for International Criminal Court. I'll just give you the intro to that. Here's a preamble. The states parties, this is international, all right, conscious that all peoples are united by common bonds, their cultures pieced together in a shared heritage, and concerned that this delicate mosaic may be shattered at any time. Mindful that during this century, millions of children, women, and men have been victims of unimaginable atrocities that deeply shock the conscience of humanity. Recognizing that such grave crimes threaten the peace, security, and well being of the world, affirming that the most serious crimes of concern to the international community as a whole must not go unpunished, and that their effective prosecution must be ensured by taking measures at the national level and by enhancing international cooperation. Determined to put an end to impunity for the perpetrators of these crimes and thus to contribute to the prevention of such crimes, recalling that it is the duty of every state to exercise its criminal jurisdiction over those responsible for international crimes, reaffirming the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, and in particular that all states shall refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. Emphasizing in this connection that nothing in this statute shall be taken as authorizing any state party to intervene in an armed conflict or in the internal affairs of any state. And determine to these ends and for the sake of present and future generations to establish an independent, permanent international criminal court in relationship with the United Nations system with jurisdiction over the most serious crimes of concern to the international community as a whole, emphasizing that the International Criminal Court established under this statute shall be complementary to national criminal jurisdictions, resolved to guarantee lasting respect for and enforcement of international justice, have agreed as follows. And so then they set out the actual structure of it. All right, so that's our preamble for the Rome Statute. Again, just re-emphasizing that there are some crimes and some things that are just so horrendous, impacting the entire world, that there needs to be someone, on it in order to hold people accountable. All right, so that's the Rome Statute. This comes into question a few times, so that's why I think it's important to at least have some rudimentary idea of what it is. So here we go. The ICC has, without a legitimate basis, asserted jurisdiction over and opened preliminary investigations concerning personnel of the United States and certain of its allies, including Israel, and has further abused its power by issuing baseless arrest warrants. So let's start pulling some of the accusations out so we can kind of walk these back again. So we have arrest warrants targeting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Foreign Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant. So we've got two people named here. Two peeps here. The ICC has no jurisdiction over the United States or Israel, as neither country is party to the Rome Statute or a member of the ICC. Neither country has ever recognized the ICC's jurisdiction, and both nations are thriving democracies with militaries that strictly adhere to the laws of war. Yikes. Yikes. The ICC's recent actions against Israel and the United States set a dangerous precedent, directly endangering current and former United States personnel, including active service members of the armed forces, by exposing them to harassment, abuse, and possible arrest. So we're using this piece of it, members of the armed forces. Oh my goodness. This malign conduct in turn threatens to infringe upon the sovereignty of the United States and undermines the critical national security and foreign policy work of the United States government and our allies. Again, this national security and foreign policy is like what they rely on for every single thing that they're doing. Every single thing. It's national security, it's foreign policy. So we can do whatever we want, and it doesn't matter what the harm is. Including Israel. So furthermore, in 2002, the Congress enacted the American Service Members Protection Act to protect U.S. military personnel. Right, unless you are transgender, then you're not protected as of today. The United States officials and military personnel of certain allied countries against criminal prosecution by an international criminal court to which the United States is not a party, stating, quote, in addition to exposing members of the armed forces of the United States to the risk of international criminal prosecution, the Rome Statute creates a risk that the President and other senior elected and appointed officials of the United States government may be prosecuted by the International Criminal Court. So he's saying here, we don't recognize your authority because we don't think you should be able to prosecute. And that means, if the United States became some kind of a war criminal situation, then the ICC wouldn't be able to go after them. All right. Next, the United States unequivocally opposes and expects our allies to oppose any ICC actions against the United States, Israel, or any other ally of the United States that has not consented to ICC jurisdiction. Wow. The United States remains committed to accountability and to the peaceful cultivation of international order, but the ICC and parties to the Rome Statute must respect the decisions of the United States and other countries, not to subject their personnel to the ICC's jurisdiction. So this is where we're starting to get into one of the reasons why he had to file this lawsuit, right? Because he works in this area, and they're saying we're not going to have any of our personnel involved, consistent with their respective sovereign prerogatives. The United States will impose tangible and significant consequences on those responsible for the ICC's transgressions, some of which may include the blocking of property and assets. And again, we need to highlight this piece because he pulls this out in his complaint. Blocking of property and assets, as well as suspension of entry into the United States. Oh my gosh. So of the ICC officials, here we go, employees and agents, as well as their immediate family members, as their entry into our nation would be detrimental to the interests of the United States. Oh my goodness gracious. All right, here we go. Next page. Again, this is just the opening. This is just the beginning. The justification for this executive order. I therefore determine that any effort by the ICC to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute protected persons, as defined in Section 8D of this order, constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States, and I hereby declare a national emergency to address that threat. I hereby determine and order the following. All right, so he's using this situation where the ICC has been formed, the actual existence of the ICC as an emergency situation for him to be able to use the emergency statute to come in and do what he wants. So, to remind everybody, the reason why he is doing a lot of what he's doing is he's using 50 U.S. Code Chapter 35, which is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And this gives some special extra authority to the president when we are in an emergency situation. I know, beyond ridiculous, I agree. But while we're here, let's take a peek just to see what this is about, because we're doing tariffs under this stuff too. So he's using this as his baseball bat, basically. So this is out of the 50 U.S. Title 50 is the War and Defense chapter of the federal code here. All right, so our international emergency economic powers is a subsection here for the war and defense piece, right? Do we have a war going on? No, but whatever. So we look here, unusual, extraordinary threat, declaration of a national emergency, exercise of presidential authorities. This is section 1701. So they're using this piece of that law in order to justify what they're saying. Unusual and extraordinary threat, just by existing, right? Exactly, Jennifer, exactly. Declaration of national emergency, exercise of presidential authorities. Any authority granted to the president by, the next section may be exercised to deal with any unusual or extraordinary threat, which has its source in whole or substantial part outside the United States to the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States. This is why our tariff situation is such a nightmare. If the president declares a national emergency with respect to such threats. All right, and then part B, the authorities granted to the president may only be exercised to deal with unusual and extraordinary threat with respect to which a national emergency has been declared for purposes of this chapter and may not be exercised for any other purpose. Any exercise of such authority to deal with any new threat shall be based on a new declaration of national emergency, which must be with respect to such threat. So obviously you can see where the issues are that have to be taken into court, right? We have to make a determination. Do we have something unusual going on? Do we have an extraordinary threat? And we already then hit that constitutional crisis moment where the question then becomes, well, I'm the president of the United States. I get to decide if it's unusual and extraordinary. And the courts don't get to do that. Meanwhile, the courts are like, well, we've got to make sure that you are in compliance with the law. So there's the fight on that, right? So that becomes a really big issue. Is it extraordinary and unusual? And he argues this in his complaint, and I think does a really great job. And again, is whole or substantially outside of the United States, right? So then the question becomes, well, if only the president can figure this out, then is the president the one saying that it's whole or substantially part outside of the United States, right? And then national security, foreign policy, or the economy of the United States. This is where we have to get our red flags up, because the problem here is that if he comes in and his people come in and they just start declaring, well, this is it. This is an unusual, extraordinary threat. And then we say, well, why is that? And then they say, because we said so, which is quite a bit on what happened in the lawsuit against the Chief Justice, right? Where we have a group saying, well, we're saying you're a federal agency, judicial committee, because we just want to. There's no support, evidence, there's no precedent, but we're just going to say it, and then it's going to be true. So that's we're in that situation here. That's what makes this the crisis level, because they just are going to say it and expect everybody to follow in line, which of course we don't do that in this country. We don't have that. We don't make that easy. All right, so keep that in mind. So that's the International Emergency Economics Powers Act. And again, we've got everything set out when it comes to unusual or extraordinary threat. And then international economic embargoes, those kinds of things are set out in here again. So this is where our tariffs get all jacked up, and sanctions with respect here to theft of trade secrets and so on. So this is it. This is the key. If you're like, what's happening with the tariffs? Why is he jerking everything around? It's because of this section in the War and Defense Code of the Federal Code. All right. So there we go. Got that. Let's get back into the executive order then. Here we are. Back again. Which threats he claiming? Good question. And I'm hoping it'll somehow be set out in his executive order. But we shall see. Right. So here we go. Section 1A. So if you're wondering about the annotations here, right, I think it is so incredibly important. If you can figure out how the code, how the law is set out, if you can pull the pieces apart, you're going to have a way larger, better understanding of how it works. So you have section 1 here, section 2, section 3, section 4. And then under the first section, we've got our subsections A and B, and then sub 1 and 2, and then sub ABC, all right? So I like to set that out just regular so that people who are not used to reading the law or reading code can understand what we're talking about here. So every subsection has a different color in order to keep you on track, so it's easier to understand. So here we go. Section 1, all property and interests in property that are in the United States that hereafter come with the United States, within the United States, or that are or hereafter come within the possession or control of any United States person, of the following persons are blocked. Now, I'm just going to read this first piece because this is where the issue is. All right, so they're blocked. Did everyone catch that? Are blocked and may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt in. So let's back this train up here and take a look again at what this is saying. All property and interests in property that are in the United States that hereafter come within the United States, or that are or hereafter come within the possession or control of any United States person, all right, possession or control, of the following persons are blocked and may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt in. So if we take this back to Mr. Iverson, the problem, of course, is that he is a prosecutor. He's prosecuting war criminals and the worst of the worst. And one of the ways you do that is by gathering evidence and going through and finding evidence. And that evidence could very well and would include any kind of tangible property or interest in property. So they're basically saying like, wait, you can't pull any kind of evidence in. So his hands are tied when it comes to actually putting a case together because it's supposed to be blocked and it can't be transferred. So that's number 1. So, and let's just see here again, and I'm only going to go through this piece, everyone, because this explains the rest of the complaint on what the problem is. So, cannot be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt in. Number 1, the person listed in the annex to this order, all right? So he is setting out, oh, this drives me bonkers. It drives me bonkers, everybody. So he is naming. Here we go. We have names. We have one person here that they are targeting that is not allowed to have any kind of contact regarding any of that stuff, right? So let's just figure out, well, what would be piece of evidence that you would need if you were trying to prove a war crime? Let's ask the chat that. What would you need for evidence, right? What would be a piece of evidence in Darfur that he could use to show we've got war crimes going on, right? So something. What could it be? What could it be? Witnesses, phones, yes, yes. I mean, what would be communication, signal chat transcripts? The signal chat. Oh my goodness. Yes, yes. DNA, right, we're not in war, true. Video, emails, phone, right. All of that, right? Bank records, sure. All of that could be used as evidence to show war crimes going on, right? So he's got this evidence and he's collecting it, going around somehow and able to, right, the communication's the key. And he's able to locate it. He's talking to the people, he's getting statements down. And they say here, you can't transfer that to person number one. Let's look and see who person number one is. All right, so the person listed, and maybe there's lots of people listed in the annex of this executive order. No, it's one guy, Karim Khan, the prosecutor of the ICC. So this is the boss. He is the boss of the ICC. He is a barrister out of the UK, right? Now, this fella is the boss. He runs the show, right? And then they have all other prosecutors going out into, the different areas. Right. So the executive order says any of that evidence that Iverson has collected, the videos, the communication, the interviews, all of that, that any of those suggestions, he can't give that to his boss. He can't share that with his boss. All right. Yeah, he can't, because that would be a violation then of this section here of the executive order, right? So that's kind of a big whoop-de-doo-dah. And again, naming one person. So the person listed in the annex to this order, we've got that. Number two, any foreign person determined by the Secretary of State in consultation with the Secretary of Treasury and the Attorney General. So let's make a note of that. So any other person, the Secretary of State, here we've got Secretary of Treasury, and then we've got the Attorney General, which we know are all big winners, right? They can just choose people, any foreign person that these people choose, right? And they're like, well, have they had directly engaged in any effort to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute a protected person without consent? Have they materially assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, or technological support? What does that even mean? That's so huge. That's such a broad situation. Or to be owned or controlled by, or to have acted or purported to act on behalf of, or directly or indirectly, any person whose property of interest and property are blocked pursuant to this order. What does that even mean? I mean, this is gobbledygook here, but what has happened then is that this prosecutor, the leader, the boss in charge of any, I mean, you got to have a head prosecutor, right? Or anyone that these three people decide they don't want to have any information, right? So Secretary of State could be like, well, I don't like you. You're Peter, and I think for some reason Peters are, problematic to our national security. All right, just fill in the blank. It's just, bologna sandwiches. It's all bologna sandwiches. But this is the huge amount of power given to these three people so they can choose who is sanctioned and is not going to be able to have any information given to them or shared, right? So that's sub A. Sub B. The prohibitions in the subsection A of this section apply except to the extent provided by statutes or in regulations, orders, directives, or licenses that may be issued pursuant to this order, and notwithstanding any contract entered into or by license or permit granted before the date of this order, which is just a bunch of, rubbish. All right. All right, so this is huge. This is a huge issue right here, section 1. So let's kind of glance through and see. We've got determined that making of donations here are blocked. All right, no donations. Prohibitions in 1A, so up here, of this order include the making of any contribution or provision for funds, goods, services by, to, or for the benefit of any person whose property and interest in property are blocked, right? And next we've got the unrestricted immigrant and non-immigrant entry into the United States of aliens determined to meet one or more of the criteria in section 1 of this order. So of course, we have to have our immigrants brought in for the International Criminal Court. Let's bring in the immigrants piece, as well as immediate family members of such aliens, or as an agent of the ICC would be detrimental. Here we go. So it's on and on and on. Again, so let's go and target immigrants. Such persons shall be treated as persons covered by Section 1 of the proclamation. Suspension of entry of aliens subject to United Nations Security Council travel bans and International Emergency Economic Power Act sanctions. Right. Now, the power again to the Secretary of State shall have the responsibility for implementing this section pursuant to such conditions and procedures as the Secretary of State has established or may establish pursuant to the proclamation. So the next thing, so the Secretary of State can decide if someone fits that category, if they are that immigrant that is an alien, that is an enemy that would fall under this. They're just basically say, or anyone Marco Rubio thinks would be okay, right? So that's it out here. Secretary of Treasury here shall submit to the President a report of additional persons that should be included to be prohibited. Now, let's skip down because the other piece of this is this definition section. All right, so section 6A, transaction that evades or avoids, or the purpose of evading or avoiding causes a violation of here is prohibited, right? And then any conspiracy formed, all right, he probably got that from his RICO cases. He probably knows what a conspiracy is, or yeah, maybe he doesn't. Nothing in this order shall prohibit transactions for the conduct of the official business of the federal government by employees, grantees, or contractors themselves. Again, that's not covering everybody. So now we need to go into the definitions section. And this is where the crazy is, everyone. When they're coming in, this administration is coming in and redefining words. They're just taking regular words and they're changing the meanings and then putting it in an executive order because now you have to use my word when it comes to this. So let's take a peek first. The term person means an individual or entity. The term entity means a government or instrumentality of such government, partnership, association, trust, joint venture, corporation, group, subgroup, or other organization. The term United States person means any United States citizen, permanent resident, alien, entity organized under the laws of the United States or any jurisdiction within the United States, including a foreign branch, subsidiary, or employee of such entity, or any person lawfully in the United States. So if you come over and you're just like, I'm here for 6 weeks to visit somebody, all right, you're included. Now, here's the protected person. And this is where his primary claim is. Because of how protected person is defined, then he's included here. All right, protected person. Any United States person, unless the United States provides formal consent to the ICC jurisdiction over that person or becomes a state party to the Rome Statute, including current or former members of the armed forces of the United States. So Mr. Iverson is a former member. Actually, is he still in the military? Come to think of it, I'm not sure he's former. He did. He voluntarily resigned, I think, in 2010. All right. So we've got prior, right? So prior member of the armed forces, current or former elected or appointed officials of the United States government, Interesting. I mean, I think he would be an official, right? And then any other person currently or formerly employed by or working on behalf of the United States government, which he's doing, and um, so 1 and 2, interesting. Any foreign person that's a citizen or lawful resident of an ally of the United States that's not consented to ICC jurisdiction over that person or is not a state party to the Rome Statute, including, and then these people. So we don't need to go much further than that, but this is where the issue is. He's saying the protected person element of it is making it impossible for him to go forward and have contact with the people he needs to have contact with in order to pursue war crimes. Oh my goodness gracious. All right, so that's enough of a heads up on the executive order, so we can start diving in here to the complaint. All right, do we want a sticky note on this one, everyone? I'll go through the nature of the case and then we'll kind of skip through to hit the highlights. But would you like a sticky note or are we good? Just let me know here. Right, seems the ICC could gather. Right. Right. Either way, no, okay. Either way. All right, fair enough. Some people have very, very strong feelings about the sticky notes. Yes, people coming in will ask. Okay, gotcha. Here we go. So, which color? Let's do orange. That seems appropriate. Oh my gosh. Here we go. Let me write this out so that everyone knows. This is the Iverson. And we're just going to put Trump here, all right? Because we know that that's who it's against. Here, and number 25-1353. And this has to do with the International Criminal Court situation. And executive order, let me make sure I know, 14203. 14203. All right, that should be all right. Like those F-word sticky notes. Oh my gosh. Let me see, where did I put those? I think, oh, here we go. Yes, here's my other set of sticky notes. Not appropriate, but yet so accurate. It's a great shade of orange. Thank you so much. Right. Are part of the ICC. Well, right. I mean, there's a lot of things here. There's a lot of working parts to this. So you can come in and be like, well, I don't like you because you said something that I don't like, so I'm going to cut you out. But when you do that, it affects so many other things. And that's just a huge issue that's forgotten about, I think. All right, here we go. Let's dive in. Nature of the case. The plaintiff, Eric Iverson, is a U.S. citizen, a decorated Army veteran, and since 2010, a prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. It's 15 years. I mean, 15 years doing this? Like, that's a special person. You have to be a very, very special person to be prosecuting war crimes for 15 years. I mean, goodness gracious. Office of the Prosecutor. He is presently the lead prosecutor in cases supported by the United States against individuals accused of committing war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity in the Darfur region of Sudan. Mr. Iverson's practice of law under the auspices of the ICC's OTP constitutes expression that's protected by the First Amendment. So we love that. First thing, him actually speaking and doing his job is First Amendment, right? Freedom of speech. So he can talk to whomever he wants. Yet defendants have prevented Mr. Iverson from investigating and prosecuting the mass atrocities in Darfur because the president issued an overbroad executive order authorizing sanctions against the ICC and its prosecutor out of a stated concern that the ICC will investigate what the order describes as protected persons, i.e. nationals of the United States and its allies. All right, so again, this is where we're getting into that question. Oh, thank you, Linnell. Yes, we're getting into that question of, so you're just gonna come and investigate stuff, and that's where the emergency is. All right, number two, plaintiff does not work and has not worked on any investigation involving protected persons. He has waited several months for the Department of the Treasury Office of Foreign Asset Control to issue regulations that narrow the needlessly broad sweep of the executive order or to grant a license that would enable him to resume his investigation of crimes committed in Darfur. No regulations or license have been forthcoming. Therefore, plaintiff files this suit to challenge defendants' imposition of overbroad and ultra-virus sanctions that violate his First Amendment rights and that exceed the statutory limits that Congress has imposed on the president's use of sanctions. On those basis, plaintiff asks this court to declare the executive order violates the First Amendment and is ultra-virus and to enjoin its enforcement against him. Now, again, and just a reminder, this means beyond the scope of authority of the president. All right. So that's what they're saying here. Jurisdiction and venue, we're going to skip past that. The parties, we're going to skip past that also, so we can kind of get into the meat of what's going on here, or tofu, whatever. Listener's choice. We do, again, he's listing out Mr. Trump and Bondi, Bessent, Rubio in their positions, right, as the secretaries or whatever. So here's our factual backgrounds. Let's take a little look at this. The ICC is a permanent international institution headquartered in The Hague, the Netherlands. It was created pursuant to a 1998 Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, the culmination of decades-long push by the international community, including the United States, for a transnational forum in which victims of the gravest crimes could seek justice. And then this is the International Code section here. The movement for international criminal justice emerged from the aftermath of the Holocaust, and the United States was a driving force behind the effort to hold Nazi-era war criminals to account through the Nuremberg trials. Throughout the latter half of the 20th century, as unspeakable horrors unfolded in Cambodia, the former Yugoslavia, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, and other conflict zones, the United States supported the creation of international criminal tribunals to address atrocity crimes committed in those jurisdictions. When President Clinton signed the Rome Statute in 2000, he noted the United States' long history of commitment to the principle of accountability from our involvement in the Nuremberg tribunals, that brought Nazi war criminals to justice, to our leadership in the effort to establish the international criminal tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda. And then they're citing his statement here. And there was quite a bit going on, if you can remember or have read or done any research on when Yugoslavia broke apart. There was a lot going on in there, a lot. Presently, 125 countries are part of the Rome Statute. Of the 32 members of NATO, 30 are parties to the Rome Statute. The United States has signed the Rome Statute, but the Senate has not ratified it. So that's interesting. Maybe we could call your senator about that. Like, hey, why haven't you ratified this? I'm just saying. The ICC has the power to exercise its jurisdiction over persons for the most serious crimes of international concern. These include genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. The ICC's jurisdiction is limited to crimes committed from July 1st of 2002 onward within the territory of a member state by nationals of a member state after that state's accession to the Rome Statute at the member state's election or upon referral by the United Nations Security Council. Ooh, we're getting in. So executive orders usually will put in when they expire they'll put a date in, and if there isn't a date, then it's kind of ongoing, and whoever comes into office next will come in and clean it up typically. uh, so most of them, I mean, to give you an example, the classified records executive order wasn't changed, altered, or updated by Mr. Trump when he came into office, so that executive order is just ongoing. So here we go. The OTP is one of the four organs, I don't know if I like that term, but whatever, that comprise the ICC and is responsible for examining situations where international crimes under the jurisdiction of the ICC are alleged to have been committed, carrying out investigations of such situations, and prosecuting individuals who are charged with those crimes. The OTP employs approximately 380 staff members of over 80 different nationalities who all serve under the direct control of the prosecutor, except in cases where the prosecutor's been recused. Under the Rome Statute, the prosecutor has full authority over the management and administration of the office, including the staff, facilities, and other resources thereof. So the fella that was named in the executive order is the one that's in charge, right? And then we've got a citation here. So the OTP personnel are by rule at the disposal of the prosecutor as appropriate for the performance of official functions. Here. To conduct investigations, the prosecutor sends missions, usually composed of investigators, cooperation advisors, and prosecutors from the OTP to concerned countries, where the OTP personnel collect and examine physical evidence, question victims and witnesses, and then report back regarding the product of their investigations for ultimate review by the prosecutor. Neither the OTP nor the ICC, more generally, has any independent enforcement authority or the means to compel process. Instead, the ICC and its organs must rely upon member states to arrest individuals subject to arrest warrants issued by the court. That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's a bit of a that's very interesting, because, and I say this because they could say technically to the U.S., like, you've got a war criminal, we want to arrest them, and then Mr. Trump could be like, nope, we're not going to do that, and then they can't do it, right? All right, cases before the ICC are brought in the name of the prosecutor, unless the prosecutor is recused or otherwise disqualified from a particular case. The prosecutor serves as the lead counsel, is responsible for signing any pleadings submitted, and is responsible formally and professionally for the conduct of any prosecution. The current prosecutor is Karim A.A. Khan, KC, a barrister from the United Kingdom, who was elected by the Assembly of State Parties to the Rome Statute as the prosecutor of the ICC on February 12th of 2021. So he's been there for a while, and he was elected into that position also, which I think is good to note. Despite its general support of the ICC, the United States has long opposed the ICC's exercise of jurisdiction over U.S. citizens. When President Clinton signed the Rome Statute in 2000, he recommended that the Senate defer ratification until the Rome Statute was amended to guarantee certain procedural due process rights and exemptions for American citizens. Okay, so now we know why it wasn't ratified by the Senate. Interesting, because apparently we're just special in this country, apparently. All right, so John Bolton, oh my gosh, who remembers John Bolton, who would go on to serve as the Bush administration's UN ambassador, wrote an op-ed the week after President Clinton signed the Rome Statute, objecting that it threatened the autonomy of U.S. political leaders. And then we're citing it here. Now, the reason that we're diving in, hello, Leslie, welcome in. The reason we're diving into the weeds on this, it seems like, well, this really isn't that important. But the reason is because the claim that it's an emergency situation, that the ICC has too much power, right? That's the emergency. So that's why we're diving into these little bits explaining how that power came about and the extent of it, all right? A fair reading of the treaty, all right, so here's Bolton. A fair reading of the treaty, for example, leaves the objective observer unable to answer with confidence whether the United States was guilty of war crimes for its aerial bombing campaigns over Germany and Japan in World War II. Say what now? What? Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. All right. Yikes. This is intolerable and unacceptable. The list of ambiguities goes on and on. How will these vague phrases be interpreted? Who will advise a president that he is unequivocally safe from the retroactive imposition of criminal liability if he guesses wrong? Is even the defensive use of nuclear weapons a criminal violation? Whoa. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay. Moreover, there's no doubt that Israel will be a target of a complaint concerning conditions and practices by the Israeli military in the West Bank and Gaza. And this was written in 2001, all right? The United States, with continuous bipartisan support for many years, has attempted to minimize the disruptive role that the United Nations has all too often played in the Middle East peace process. We do not now need the ICC interjecting itself into extremely delicate matters at inappropriate times. Israel, therefore, was one of the few governments that voted with the United States against the statute. Oh my goodness. Right, so he's saying, based off of this terminology, the United States could be found guilty of war crimes for bombing Japan. So, wasn't there even more recent? Yeah, it's a good question. We'll keep going through here, but this complaint is quoting him. So let me ask this question though, and I think it's worth asking. Would that be considered a war crime? Right? That idea of dropping those bombs in Japan. Are we dealing with a war crime? And if it is a crime, and as we've discussed before, crimes are an act plus an intent, and that equals a crime. That's our crime equation. But once you have a crime, you can subtract defenses from that crime. All right. And so, yes, you did it, but you had an appropriate reason. So, and that's my symbol there. So this could be, that would be a situation where that would need to be discussed, right? So we have an act and intent. So we do have a crime here in harming this in this situation. But the defense was, we had a world war going on and we couldn't seem to get it stopped. So that would be one of the big debates here. It was intended to end the war. Exactly right. Very touchy subject with regards to that. But I would say too, there have been many situations where the U.S. has been involved other than just this, where the behavior could be considered a war crime. And then the question becomes, is the United States saying then that they are above the whole rest of the world? And if they want to do war crimes, then war crimes it is, and there's no accountability. And so that's the piece in here where they're saying, we want to make sure that we're not part of that. We're not called out for that. Just everybody else is. So that's a little disturbing, I would say. And by little, I mean a lot. So here we go. Let's go to, it's tricky. Right. Oh, yes. Quite questionable things. And, our propaganda over here is pretty flippin' amazing, right? So Vietnam, we tied, and various other things. The propaganda is like, we always are the good guys. But that's just not always the case. And it's not possible. It's not as black and white as that, which tends to be why a lot of people are really hurting right now, because they think there's the good guys and the bad guys instead of realizing that a lot of things are mixed. So here we go. Well, I think the nuclear element of it is really what brought that in. Right, Germany, Vietnam. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Uh, okay, yeah, hit the thumbs up, everybody. Yeah, this is a tough subject, everyone. This is a tough one. That continues to be something that must be discussed. We got to talk about it. At the very least, we got to talk about it. All right, June 2002, Congressional Research Service, which is an amazing place that does a lot of great stuff, summarized the Rome Statute's political implications as followed. And again, the reason why we're looking into this is to figure out whether or not this emergency that Mr. Trump's declared is appropriate or not. Perspectives differ on the impact of the ICC on the U.S. interests. Once it begins operation, some see the ICC as a fundamental threat to the U.S. armed forces, its political leaders, and U.S. defense and foreign policy. Others see it as a valuable foreign policy tool for defining and deterring crimes against humanity, a step forward in the decades long U.S. effort to end impunity for egregious mass crimes. All right, so that was another one. Again, we really have, there's a couple of roads to go down. So 2 months later, Congress enacted the American Service Members Protection Act, which I didn't know even existed here. And I think that's a good thing to address the risk to U.S. persons being detained or imprisoned by or on behalf of or at the request of the International Criminal Court. All right, so we're specific to service members. And the reason why I put this in, I'm just thinking out loud here because we've got so much going on with the Alien Enemies Act, right? Where we have some questions that there are citizens who've been caught up in all of that. But if they're service members and citizens, it's possible they could even use this Protection Act against their own governments. I'm just putting that out there. I'm like, isn't that interesting? Just, points to ponder. To address the risk of U.S. persons being detained or imprisoned by or on behalf of or at the request of the International Criminal Court. In enacting this law, Congress found the Rome Statute creates a risk that the President and other senior elected and appointed officials of the United States government may be prosecuted by the International Criminal Court, which is, no less than members of the armed forces of the United States. Senior officials in the United States government should be free from the risk of prosecution by the International Criminal Court, especially with respect to official actions taken by them to protect the national interests of the United States. I don't know. I've got too many things to think about to know if this is okay or not. But my initial thought is not everybody goes by the Constitution, right? So this kind of immunity that they think that they should have, I'm not sure that that's appropriate. All right. Oh, well, we'll see. We'll see. Anyone in the world has the ability to commit war crimes. True. Everyone should have the ability to be prosecuted. I agree completely. I agree. You cannot have a situation where no one has accountability. Even the king of England had some accountability. It wasn't much, but there you go. While the ASPA broadly regulates the United States relationship to the ICC to advance this purpose, Congress also permitted the United States to support ICC activities under certain circumstances. All right. Here we go. So statutory protections. Nothing in this subchapter shall prohibit the United States from rendering assistance to international efforts to bring justice. Saddam Hussein, Slobodan Milosevic, right? This is the Yugoslavia situation. Oh my goodness. Yugoslavia. My heart breaks every time I look back at that. Osama bin Laden and other members of Al Qaeda. Leaders of Islamic Jihad and other foreign nationals accused of genocide, war crimes, or crimes against humanity, or from rendering assistance to the International Criminal Court to assist with investigations and prosecutions of foreign nationals related to the situation in Ukraine. That's interesting. Right. The United States has provided direct support to the work of the ICC in multiple situations consistent with its foreign policy interests. This support has transcended party lines as both Democrat and Republican administrations have assisted several prominent ICC investigations. And then we've got an example, and I'm going to kind of fast forward a little bit here. He's giving some examples of when that did occur for Darfur in the beginning. March 2005, October 2006, again, prosecuting in Darfur here, and he's saying Congress was supportive of what was going on. 2020, Congress passed and the president signed a National Defense Appropriations Act reiterating that they support the ICC. Every administration from the George W. Bush administration to the present has supported the prosecution of those culpable for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity in Darfur. Also, the Trump administration originally supported the international accountability measures in Darfur originally. So again, we have to wonder what happened here, what changed. So following the April 2025 outbreak of violence in Sudan that targeted civilians and humanitarian actors in Zamzam and Abu Shuk, including killings of at least 10 U.S.-funded relief workers, the State Department reiterated the United States humanitarian and foreign policy interests in upholding international humanitarian law in Sudan. And here's our quote from the press briefing, April 15th of 2025. Is that right? Is that right? All right. The belligerents must uphold the obligations under international humanitarian law and must be held accountable. This conflict has caused death, destruction, and displacement crisis that has the potential to destabilize the entire region with massive flows of displaced people, arms, and disease. So just to make sure we understand here, this executive order is basically setting out that the person in charge of basically holding the line without destabilizing the Sudan or Darfur, we're not allowed to talk to that guy. Yikes, yikes, yikes. That's a lot. All right, so let's keep going forward here. We're skipping through. Skip. UN Security Council here. And then again, he's going through and giving examples. The funds were supposed to go to support ICC, over $2 million. Legal advisors here. Again, we're skipping through. U.S. courts have consistently cited the Rome Statute and the work of ICC to interpret international law. So again, this is set out in a way to say, there's not an international emergency situation here because we're doing the same thing we have been doing since 2000. And so let's pause and think about that, right? So he's declaring, Mr. Trump in February, so like 2 months ago, is saying we now have an international emergency economic powers issue with the ICC that has been running and doing stuff for 20 years that we've fully supported, 25 years. So we have 25-year history of supporting and actually giving money to and speaking for the ICC, except for in February. So in February of this year, we now have an international emergency. 25 years after the fact, exactly, Kea. Exactly. All right, so here's the IEEPA. Again, this is more of that justification for the executive order. The IEEPA authorizes the president to take specific actions in response to a national emergency constituting an unusual and extraordinary threat, which has its source in whole or substantial part outside of the United States, to the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States. Again, if you want to take a look at the tariff situation, in particular, once the president's declared such an emergency, IEEPA permits the president to block during the pendency of an investigation, regulate, direct, and compel, nullify, void, prevent, or prohibit any acquisition, holding, withholding, use, transfer, withdrawal, transportation, importation, or exportation of, or dealing in, or exercising any right, power, or privilege with respect to, or transactions involving any property in which any foreign country or a national thereof has any interest by any person or with respect to any property subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Right, so they're setting out what the powers are under the IEEPA. So here, 2022 unanimously passed a resolution stating it's an international tribunal seeking to uphold the rule of law, especially in areas where no rule of law exists. So we've got full support from the Senate here. Specifically, this is the Ukrainian piece, and resolved to encourage member states to petition the ICC or other appropriate international tribunal to take any appropriate steps to investigate war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by the Russian armed forces. Now, I think we're getting another piece here, all right? And their proxies and President Putin's military commanders at the direction of President Vladimir Putin, a resolution expressing the sense of the Senate condemning the Russian Federation, President Vladimir Putin, members of the Russian Security Council, the Russian Armed Forces, and Russian military commanders for committing atrocities, including alleged war crimes against the people of Ukraine and others. Yes, yes. All right, there we go. That's a big piece. All right, so we've got 2024 appropriated funds going there, 2024 later. Those would be okay. So we're going to, fast forwarding it. Russian called in a favor. It kind of seems like it, doesn't it? So we're fast forwarding here, just again to have some idea, where again is our emergency. So here's the executive order language here. And again, I'm not going to read line for line because I want to kind of make it through here to the end. But on February 6th, Trump issued the executive order 14203 imposing sanctions, which was substantively identical to executive order 13928. The president determined that any effort by ICC to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute protected persons as defined in Section 8D of this order constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. Right. So we're declaring a national emergency because of that. The president made clear that relevant threat investigations and so on of protected persons only and authorized blocking sanctions to counter any ICC actions against the U.S., Israel, or any other ally of the United States that's not consented to ICC jurisdiction. Protected person is set out any ally of the United States, which in turn defines a NATO member state or a major non-NATO ally. Currently 19 countries designated as MNNAs, as well as Taiwan. Sudanese nationals, such as those being prosecuted for perpetuating genocide in Darfur, are not protected persons. So he's saying even if you use that language, it still's not covering it. The executive order prohibits individuals from directly or indirectly providing funds, goods, services. Here, it's unlawful to cause or conspire with another person to violate the executive order or to evade prohibitions. Here again. So we're just saying, he's just saying, look, I can't have any interactions. We can't give any information. We can't go forward. So here's how the executive order is impairing Mr. Iverson. The executive order and the designation of the ICC prosecutor as an SDN directly impairs, if not totally prohibits, Mr. Iverson from engaging in the practice of law and engaging in otherwise protected expression as part of his professional duties as a prosecutor in the OTP. Because the executive order has designated the ICC prosecutor, there is a substantial risk that any action taken by any staff member of the OTP will be construed by defendants as the provision of a direct or indirect benefit to an SDN. The staff of the OTP are by law at the disposal of the prosecutor and entrusted by law with conducting criminal prosecutions under his direct supervision and control and in his name. So they can't do anything because they have named this person as someone that is not to be allowed to have any information. All right. And then he goes in and he says, look, I'm not dealing with protected peoples in here. I should be able to talk with whomever I need to talk to. So let's fast forward so we can get to the grounds for relief. So this is where we talk about what exactly he's looking for. Up here, we've kind of already gone through it. We're incorporating. He's saying, look, we've got anything that's going to benefit this prosecutor's a problem. So what are they asking for? Executive order violates the First Amendment in 3 distinct ways. First, it's unlawfully overbroad by prohibiting First Amendment activities that have no relationship to the need to shield protected persons from investigation or prosecution before the ICC. Second is a content-based restriction on speech that discriminates based on viewpoint by targeting only expression that could be construed as a benefit to the prosecutor while permitting expression that's adverse to the prosecutor. ICC, oh, that's huge. That's a huge no-no for First Amendment. And third, the executive order prohibits citizens, such as Mr. Iverson, from engaging in the core First Amendment protected activities that are incident to the practice of law, including conducting investigations to ascertain the truth, communicating with witnesses, experts, and others, preparing reports, memoranda, and advocating for criminal accountability. So that's pretty huge. That's a pretty big issue. So ground number 2 here is a violation of 50 U.S. Code section 1702, and this has to do with the power structure, right? So he's overutilizing his power, ultra virus, of the Emergency Protection Act, and claiming that he can use this to allow for sanctions, right? So that is not appropriate either. Ground 3, precluded by subsequent legislation. Now we're saying under this emergency designation again, there are problems because of how we're defining unusual or extraordinary situations. So, final paragraph here, rather than address itself to an unusual and extraordinary threat, the executive order effectively criminalizes not only the work of the ICC prosecutor, but of any U.S. person who works for the ICC's OTP anywhere in the world. Even the broad and general terms of the IEEPA, if they do not permit the president, through executive order, to override the specific and carefully crafted congressional legislation respecting the ICC. So the executive order is therefore precluded. All right. Oh, thank you. So there's legislation with full and complete support of ICC. It's not falling into this emergency language in the statute, and an executive order is an overreach of his power anyway. All right, so we're violating the First Amendment. We're violating Section 1702, 1701, because the threat ICC poses to protected persons is not a new, unusual, or extraordinary threat, right? It's been forever in the makings. So they're asking the court to enter a judgment enjoining defendants from commencing or authorizing any prosecution of Mr. Iverson under this executive order. So he's asking for immunity here for exercising his First Amendment rights. Who decides the outcome of this case? It's been filed in the D.C., I believe. Let's make sure. If it's number 1, it usually means federal court in D.C., yeah. So D.C. court. Here, enter a judgment enjoining defendants from commencing or authorizing any civil enforcement. So he's asking for immunity from criminal prosecution and civil problems, lawsuits, award him costs, reasonable attorney's fees, and then anything else the court deems appropriate. So there we go. Oh, we're still here. We're still here. So that's the final piece, everyone. All right, we kind of rushed through those last little bits, but I think we've talked about each aspect of it to some degree, so we have some idea of what's really going on. So there's some questions here. There's some pretty significant questions going on. We've got, first of all, where's our retribution elements is Israel. Sounds like Israel. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry if I spelled it wrong, everybody. We also have some kind of potential quid pro quo going on with Russia, right? The Russian situation. So there's that's involved. We have 25 years was fine, equals fine. And then now it's an emergency. That's pretty questionable. Now it's an emergency. Those are some big ones, right? Those are some pretty big situations. Yeah, I love the Chester. I love it. Oh my gosh. Yes, it's extremely horrifying. I agree. I agree. What court can even do to force Trump to give anything to ICC lawyer? So, right, the jurisdiction's already established here because he is. Let's look at the exact piece. The court has subject matter jurisdiction to grant the relief here. The court's inherent equitable parties, and then the venues proper. So he is a U.S. citizen, licensed attorney, and he is working and lawyering out there. And because of that, he is where he can file is in D.C., which is what he's done. Right? Oh, no problem. Right. Why would a U.S. court give anything up? Well, I think the problem here is that if anything, if we've got laws that are overbroad, now an executive order is not a law, but if there's something that's overbroad or overreaching presidential authority, the courts have to, like, it's their job to rein him back in. And this was set out in a very famous case involving the steel workers unions back during the Korean War, when the president was like, well, I'm just going to take over the steel mills because we need steel. That's important. And the court said, you cannot do that in an executive order. That's taking it too far. That's what the courts do. And what they're claiming here is that he's taking it too far. He's claiming there's an emergency that justifies him sanctioning this lead prosecutor of the ICC, but there is no national emergency going on. And even if there was, according to how the executive order is written, Mr. Iverson's work in Darfur doesn't fall under this. So the lead prosecutor is basically his boss that he needs to communicate with. All right. So that's the road that we're going down here. Right. Right. The court could find that the EO is unconstitutional. Exactly. And that's what they're asking for. And they're asking on grounds of this is beyond his executive power and authority and a violation of First Amendment rights. Right. So, we got to keep our chin up when we're working through this and we're saying, well, he's not going to follow the Constitution. That's absolutely a valid point. But we must remember here that there's going to be a turning point when we turn a corner, and we're getting very close. Based off of the order that came out in the Perkins Coie case, my goodness, we're turning a corner. With what's happening with the El Salvador situation, yes. So our courts are starting to do that, but we work so slowly that it's going to take some time. So it looks like the bad guys are getting away with the bad stuff because it takes some time to get it calmed down. SCOTUS needs to reassess what immunity. It absolutely. Pretty much any case that makes it to SCOTUS where there is a question of immunity is a chance for SCOTUS to redefine the boundaries. And they need to do that. And they actually even said that in their decision. They said, we don't know exactly what official is, what official acts are. We don't know exactly the parameters of this immunity because those questions haven't been asked in front of the lower courts. They haven't made decisions. So we don't even have a record to jump off of. And they gave example of pardons, but when it comes into this gray area of like, foreign relations or national security, like that's not been defined, and the Supreme Court needs to define it. So all of these cases, if Mr. Trump's coming in and saying, well, I'm immune from criminal prosecution, this is going to be the time for the court to really figure out and narrow down and explain what the heck they mean, because that immunity decision was so broad. Right. And again, remember, the immunity decision only covers criminal prosecutions. All right. Criminal prosecutions. That's it. Can his criminal history be used? Yes. But it depends. It depends, because his criminal history was involving cases of fraud, which shows that he is, a liar. Anything that shows that you have lying as a past issue, fraud cases, those are usually allowed to be used at certain points. But it depends. I hope they do not pass tax money for Christian. Well, yeah, that's a whole nother, oh my goodness gracious. That's a whole nother situation. But I think this is a really strong case. I think it's really well written. Now, I have pulled up the full docket, and he has requested a preliminary injunction. He has requested that to put into place an injunction so he can talk to his boss and continue to go forward. So we will see how that goes. Another very interesting thing has been that the attorney has been trying to get a hold of the defendants. They were supposed to actually have a hearing today, or a meet in court. It looks like that was set, and I'm not sure that they actually were able to get any of the defendants involved in that. So I think already we have a situation where the defendants are saying, well, we didn't know anything was going on. We didn't know about this hearing. We didn't know, blah, blah, blah. So I think this case will be the one when they try to intentionally turn their back on it, and we'll have to see what happens. Again, I don't know. I haven't seen any reporting. I don't know if they actually had that hearing or not. We'll have to see. Executive order absolutely has to do with Israel. What's changed is that Israel's being held accountable by the ICC. The U.S. could be culpable since we funded the whole thing. Ooh, good point, Rachel. Good point. Very good point. And, that you can see how those go together. Right? Now, I don't spend very much time on the Middle East issues because it's so horrible. It's just too much. It's just outside of the scope of what I can do. So I don't deal with it a lot. But I tell you, there's a lot of hinky stuff going on here. And with this executive order, again, you can really pull any executive order and see who it was that he is mad at. Right? Who it is that he's trying to go after. It's so specific in some cases where he's literally naming the person. Why do we have executive orders when people are specifically being named? Right? I mean, this is just crazy town. We're in crazy town. All right, everybody. With that, I will bring our my third live of the day today to a close. I think this was incredibly important. I will be, of course, following this case and seeing how things turn out. In fact, I'm very curious if they were able to meet today and see what is going to happen there. I would love to see a preliminary injunction so he can go and like talk to the people he needs to talk to. That'd be great. With that, I am now definitely saying I will be doing lives on Tuesday nights on the tube, everybody. That is for sure my schedule over here on the tube. I may pick it up to a second night, but we'll have to see. Things are a little bit bonkers right now. So I will definitely be back here next Tuesday at the same time. If you want to catch, breaking news, I guess, or orders that are just dropping, as soon as that order drops and I have a chance to peek at it, then I just jump on TikTok live. It's easier for me to do that with the breaking orders because everything goes so fast on TikTok. But over here, we can plan it out. We can annotate. We can talk about the issues. So I appreciate being able to do that. Tuesday night on the tube. I love it. I love it. I love it. So we'll catch up again. Yes, that's right. Coffee. Oh my gosh, everybody. I'm going to go fall to my bed. I'm worried about this whole new situation where he's like tariffs on foreign films. That could be the last straw for me. Anyway, how long do they have to respond? I'm not sure exactly how many days they have. It's under the rules of civil procedure, like 30 to 60 days, something like that. But on the other hand, if there is an emergency temporary restraining order or preliminary injunction on the floor, which there is in this case, then they need to keep moving on pretty quick. So I will check in with you all if it's a breaking order. I'll be over on the talk. Other than that, I'll see you next week over here on the tube, everyone. Take care, and thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate it.